Hello there. This is not the rise of the far right. No, it's the majority rediscovering democracy. The self-declared minority victims and their woke enablers are now out in force screeching about the far right fueling the Reform UK surge. But these victims and their supporters are in the main those with minority interests or their followers. And these people have grown extremely accustomed to our political and legal systems bowing down to their every demand, and they now regard it as their right to be treated in such a manner. But they are now feeling threatened by the democratic votes in the recent local elections and by-election. Whether you think Nigel Farage is saviour or serpent makes no difference. Reform UK looks set to sweep the local and general election boards. And those victims feel threatened by the majority voters who maybe don't like the massive cultural and demographic changes being forced on them by successive minority interest governments. But instead of asking why are the majority rejecting those huge changes to their way of life, the victims and their woke acolytes double down with the usual accusations against the rest of us of racism and bigotry against the newcomers. Newcomers that they now claim built everything here, and now we hear they pay all the taxes too. This is the route to them claiming we must thank them for being here. They do not have to thank us for letting them be here, as they think it is now their right to be here. But this is a democracy, and in a democracy it is the majority will that should and must prevail for it to continue to be called a true democracy. But what we've ended up with is a set of small minorities now in positions of power to dictate to the majority, to lord over us and dictate to us what we can and cannot do, what we can and cannot say, and even what we can and cannot think. To the point that the courts assume the police and they can decipher silent prayer in people's heads. Well, Christian prayer at least. This new blasphemy law coming down the tracks is an absolute prime example of a minority interest dictating to the majority on these matters. And there is no way I can ever believe that the majority of people in this country would ever agree to have their freedom of expression curtailed by such a law. Can you? But minorities now rule. Now, part of this derives from the two-party establishment system, where you have safe seats and marginal seats. The parties on both sides originally fought tooth and nail to protect those that voted for them. But with the advent of political science, if that's what you want to call it, the party leaders suddenly realised that the safe seats were just that, safe. So they identified the constituencies where voters could be swayed and went after those first, followed by where their opposition was weakest. So their core voters became disenfranchised in favour of the minority few 100,000 voters who lived in those swing constituencies. And when those swing constituencies contain large numbers of newcomers to the land, those newcomers become the potential swing voters that our party leaders are so desperate to get on their party membership lists. Minority interests become the order of the day. And political leaders will chase them for all they are worth, because getting into office is, of course, more important than the proper exercising of the sovereignty loaned to them by the majority voter. And sadly, in our two-party but uniparty establishment system, that bodes ill for democracy. But is manna sent from heaven for those with minority interests? And my answer to those who claim that if you treat minorities well, then the majority benefits, is look around you and ask yourself why the majority is now rebelling against that woke dogma and getting on the Nigel Farage Reform UK bus. Maybe the tolerance of the majority has been stretched too far. Maybe forcing the majority by laws and threats of laws to suck up what they're ordered to suck up has shredded the majority tolerance. And what's the response? Up until now it has been to press down harder on the pressure cooker lid in the hope that the majority can be quelled into total obedience. Well, those days are now over, as illustrated by Keir Starmer's recent speech on mass immigration. The Prime Minister of His Majesty's government has at last been forced to acknowledge that it has gone too far. But even then, he had to heap praises on the newcomers for political expediency, to tell them how much of a benefit they are to us, just for being here. My question is, are they here for the good of the majority and the country, or for a better life for themselves and their minority interests? A legitimate question, as the two do not necessarily go hand in hand. Ultimately, which way is the benefit truly flowing in? Especially if some misuse our modern West softness to come and do us harm, as we have found out to our cost on several occasions. Something that does not help overall social cohesion. So no, this is not the rise of some mythical far right. This is a concerned majority within a democracy voting to make their voices heard. So it pees me off when I see some politicians who have benefited from the democratic processes I outlined earlier berating voters for supporting a party that more aligns with how they think the country should be run than with the current woke open borders view. The woke completely ignore, or worse, the feelings and worries of the majority who have been forced by such mechanisms as cancellations, debanking and lawfare to stay quiet and tolerant, as the entire cultural and demographic landscape of the country they and their forebears grew up in is demolished and rebuilt into some alien, dystopian New World Order. It should by now be dawning on the woke left that the game is up. They have been found out by the majority. And it is the majority, not the far right. No, the majority that is hitting back hard through the ballot box. The minority will now have to find new words to replace the massively overused fascist, Nazi and bigot that they have previously used to brand their opponents with. But those days are now gone. We now have a majority very concerned for their futures and that of their children and grandchildren who have rediscovered democracy. Finally, please like, subscribe and comment below, and a big shout out to our Patreon supporters, and thank you for watching.